We're taking you deep into the complicated world of your food supply. Whether it's a steak, salad, or slice of bread, there's a lot happening in the process of getting what you eat to your table, and you should know about it. Who owns the farmland? Who is growing your food? Do we have a secure food supply? Is our food safe? And are we stewarding the land and animals well in the process? In this 5-part series, we're pulling back the curtain and answering those questions. I'm Rita Rogers.
And I'm Cecily Dickey, and this is the Boom Clap podcast where culture and conviction collide.
So this is the 5th episode of this 5-part series, and today Cecily and I are going to talk together about some things that we didn't cover, rehash some things that we did cover that we want to go into a little bit deeper, and just share our general opinions and conversation together.
And I'm excited for this because while I've loved recording with all our guests and I feel like they all brought so much to the table, I gotta say there's something special for me about the ones where it's just us as well. And it's been a while since we've done that.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
A while.
I'm excited to sit and talk with you. Whether you're a consumer looking to source quality food locally for your family or a farmer looking to streamline your business, Barn to Door is a great resource for that. I've personally been on the consumer end of Barn to Door and had a great shopping experience finding a local farmer in my community to source beef. But Barn to Door can help you also if you're a farmer. They actually power over 1,000 farmers across all 50 states, selling to more than 1 million people. If you're a farmer and you want to improve your brand presence, streamline your business, and be able to spend more time with your family and less time doing the tasks associated with connecting with the consumer, go to barntodoor.com to learn more. If you're a buyer like me looking to purchase from a local farmer, go to localfarmfinder.com and discover farmers in your own community. Barn to Door is a great resource for farmers and consumers and helping you with food security. I don't know. I felt like some of these episodes I've had, as always, a lot to say. I think especially like that Will Harris episode, I really wanted, there's so much like, he's like, do you have any more questions? I'm like, yeah, tons. But I felt
like a whole other series.
Yeah, we focused a lot on land with him, and I wish we had focused a little more on animals. So I did email Jenny. We'll read that in a little bit, but I emailed her, his daughter, with some more questions, and she was gracious to get back to us really quickly. But yeah, it was really good to hear from our guests a lot of different perspectives on agriculture in a lot of different arenas of agriculture. But at the same time, it was interesting to see the same problems and same issues keep coming up in every conversation consistently.
Yep. It's like no matter what arena they were in, they were able to like pull at those common threads. Yeah. And I feel like when you and I were laying out this series and we kind of like started breaking things down, laying out the skeleton for it, we had an idea what some of those issues were, but not to the extent that it's like, okay, not only is it just our weird brains that seem to be like on the same track a lot of the time, but everyone else is picking up on this as well, at least everyone else that's in the industry. So I'm really thankful that we were able to have those common threads throughout every single episode so that by the time we get to episode 5, if you've been listening since episode 1, you should have a really good understanding of what those challenges are. Even if you're just a regular person buying your food at the grocery store every week for your family. Like, I feel like you will have a much clearer understanding of the challenges in agriculture.
Yeah, I agree. So, I don't know. I felt like creating a series. Let's just talk about creating a series really quick. Because if you guys didn't listen to us before, we have been a weekly episode podcast for 3 years. And on our 3rd anniversary, we decided to move into the series format. And the reason for doing that is we feel like, and we don't just feel like, this is a fact. There is so much information coming at us so quickly all the time. So many headlines just, running off at us. But it doesn't often go real deep. We just learn surface level information about a lot of things. And so we didn't feel like we were providing only surface level on our weekly podcast by any means, but we felt that there would be value in bringing you a dedicated series where we could go deep into one topic. And so that was our rationale, and that's what we did. And it felt that way to us creating it too.
It that's, I guess I really wasn't expecting it to
I
that
didn't
degree.
either. I didn't either.
Oh my goodness. So I don't know. I just feel like what we were trying to do is to create space for people to truly focus on what they're learning and to talk about those really important things. But wow, creating it and like planning it and recording it, it tested my boundaries for focus and ability and scheduling and just keeping my wits about me. Like it was a new experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this setup right here, just let's talk about my setup really quick.
Yeah.
If you follow me on Instagram, you got to see I moved from the basement where I was weekly to have a little bit better space so we could do video. But I have a baby gate because I have a 1-year-old. I have a baby gate around my setup to prevent him from crawling into the cord space. So this is coming down after today. Real excited about that. Not taking up my dining room area anymore, but
Yes,
it's tested a lot of things here, including my baby.
I mean, I feel like we went into this with a very idealistic perspective. Like, yeah, we'll schedule our guests and we'll try to record the whole series over a period of a few days, just so it's really focused and intense and concentrated. But then you actually start scheduling and then people have to reschedule and there's cancellations and there's this and that and technological issues. And
it took 3 weeks.
Your living room has been like that for 3 weeks. Yes. So it's been a journey.
But all that to say, it's been good. It's been good.
It's been so good. I mean, I feel like I've just learned a lot, even about having a podcast and an independent podcast too, right? Like when we think of some of the content that's being put out by some of the biggest podcasters that most people are familiar with and listen to, there's like a whole team that goes into it. And we always knew what kind of work it was, but this highlighted it for us in a whole new way. And I feel like we should really give a shout out to our editor, Andy.
For sure.
You guys don't see him, but he makes it possible for you to see us and hear us. And changing over to like this video format, we really needed to do it because even like if you think about, if you're listening on Spotify, you can watch us on Spotify. And that's becoming like a normal thing that all of podcasts have video. And so I feel like we didn't really even know that, but we decided to make the transition to video like just in a nick of time. Because I feel like if Spotify's doing that, Apple's probably going to do that pretty soon. And if you don't have video, then all of a sudden you're out. So, and putting together this series video wise with like multiple interviews per episode, multiple ads, because we had such good sponsors. We had to make sure that you guys heard them all. Like it was a lot of work. Plus we have that cool intro video and I don't know, just a lot of things that he made possible that we just absolutely could not have done on our own because I feel like we were at our max just with what we were doing. And I'm just not going to learn how to do video. You know what I mean? So thank you, Andy. You've been so helpful to us.
Super helpful. We appreciate it. So, but that is our team.
Yeah.
That is our team.
That is our team.
It's us. And Andy editing.
Rita, Andy.
Yeah. Oh,
it's a fun team.
So we appreciate all that to say, we appreciate you guys listening to us and sharing it and spreading the word. So if you learned something from this, please pick out an episode, share your favorite episode to a friend, tell them it's a series, tell them to come listen. So yeah,
it's a worthwhile listen for sure.
For sure. Yep. Okay. So let's go into, this episode, we wanted to tackle like the food supply chain as a whole. Basically, like, is it secure? Is it safe? Is our food safe? And then stewardship of the land and animals, right? That was kind of our main points, right?
Yes, those were our main 3 points that we tried to like focus on, not only during the episodes, but in planning the episodes. We're like, we want people that'll speak to these areas: supply, safety, stewardship.
Yeah. And I think we did that, but there are a few things that we didn't touch on that I would like to just talk about a little bit. So I don't know where you want to start. Maybe, I don't know. Where do you want to start? Should we start with the vaccines and foods and things like that?
Sure.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Okay. So I was thinking about years ago, I had heard that there was a not a push really, but somebody started studying being able to put birth control in corn.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a long time ago. And so when I looked it up, I got a flag like this article is more than 22 years old. And it's from September 9th, 2001. First of all, I graduated high school in 2001. So I'm like, what? 22 years old? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm old.
Say what?
So anyway, yes, there was this push, not push, but the title of the article is Corn Set to Stop Man from Spreading His Seed, which is just kind of funny in itself. But it says, scientists have created the ultimate GM crop, contraceptive corn. Waving fields of maize may one day save the world from overpopulation. We got into population control a little bit during this series. We'll talk about that again here probably on this episode a little bit deeper. But says the pregnancy prevention plants are the handiwork of the San Diego biotech company Epicite, where researchers have discovered rare class of human antibodies that attack sperm. By isolating the genes that regulate the manufacture of these antibodies and by putting them in corn plants, the company has created tiny horticultural factories that make contraceptives. So long story short, we don't need to get into this deeply, but this was a thought to make corn that people would eat and cause them not to be able to procreate as a means to stopping overpopulation of the earth. And so even though this did not come to fruition that we know of anyways, it was a thought and they studied it and found a way to do it. And now currently there is a push to study putting vaccines in lettuce has been the choice vegetable getting headline space, but I think any vegetable, right?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
So I'm looking up.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so obviously if they were thinking about that 22 years ago, even if it didn't come to fruition, it's obviously something that's on their minds. But I think the fact of the matter is they maybe figured out they don't even have to do that, because the reality is the birth rate is not keeping up with, I guess, what it would be called the replacement rate, right? So if we keep going at this rate, we're actually not going to be able to replace the population as people die. But sperm production is decreasing anyway because of the way we farm, because of the way we live. So I just looked it up a second here. It says sperm production or function can be affected by overexposure to certain environmental elements, including industrial chemicals, extended exposure to benzenes, toluene, I'm going to say some of these wrong, xylene, herbicides, pesticides, organic solvents, painting materials, and lead might contribute to low sperm counts. So, and it showed in 2022, there was a study published about global trends in sperm count, and it showed that sperm counts fell on average by 1.2% per year between 1973 to 2018. From the year 2000, this rate of decline accelerated to more than 2.6% per year. So, I mean, maybe they're not putting it in the corn, but maybe they don't have to. You know what I mean? It's happening anyway.
Yeah. Well, we know atrazine. I don't remember if it's a herbicide or pesticide, but either way, there's been studies that have shown, and I have video that I need to share yet. Cheryl Atkinson, she just recently covered this again with the gentleman, I can't remember if he was from UC Berkeley, that studied this, basically where it's making males have female tendencies. And I think it completely sterilized male frogs. And it's a commonly used, I think, herbicide. Maybe it's a pesticide. But anyway, it was covered up essentially. And his research was covered up. And so there are things that we're doing, like you said, that are ultimately causing this regardless of them putting it directly into corn as a contraceptive.
And I mean, this is unrelated in a way, but very related in another way. People have studied that women on birth control have found more feminine type men more attractive while they're on birth control. So, I mean, these are all just things. These are all just things that people are doing that are having an impact.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
The point of bringing up the corn situation for me was now they're trying to put vaccines into our food. So they moved from contraceptives 22 years ago, as that article told me, to putting vaccines in our foods. And this was, I think, in 2021 or 2022, they started talking about this. And I'm just going to read a bit of this article here, but I think it was maybe San Diego State or Riverside, in Riverside, California, maybe this was happening. I'll get to it here, but the point of this article was a Tennessee lawmaker was bringing up legislation to make their constituents aware that this was happening. So there was going to be food labeling tied to vaccines being in products. They're like, you can't just not tell people. But it says that the University of California, Riverside has perfected vaccinating lettuce, adding that the University of California, Berkeley has conducted similar tests on tomatoes, and that R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company has mimicked that with tobacco products. And this article says perfected, but in my research leading up to this, I don't know that they have it perfected and that they're doing it yet, but they're definitely working towards it.
Well, and what does perfected even mean? Because even when you think of human vaccination, which has been going on for...
Well, the COVID vaccine was perfect, according to whoever you listen to.
Perfect. Totally perfect. No problems whatsoever.
Yes, this is fine. It's fine. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Just do it. In September 2021, UC Riverside published an article about school scientists studying whether they can turn edible plants like lettuce into mRNA vaccine factories in a similar fashion to how COVID-19 vaccines employed messenger RNA technology to battle infectious disease. The project was conducted via a $500,000 grant from National Science Foundation with the goal of displaying whether DNA-containing mRNA vaccines can be successfully delivered into the part of a plant cell where it will replicate, demonstrating the plants can produce enough mRNA to rival a traditional shot, and finally determining the right dosage. But what is the right dosage if you're like eating a salad or like a leaf of lettuce? Like, that's going to be different. And so I find that they can't really just like put this stuff in supermarket shelves. But I think that they were saying, I don't think it was in this article, but you guys can fact check this on your own. But I think they were basically saying that it's not the way they're doing it. It's not going to be where you would just like eat so much and there's like a certain dose. It's just like, you can eat however much you want and it's going to be okay, which I don't buy into that. And I don't want to eat any of it. But I don't think they're doing it where there would be like a certain dosage. Like, here's an apple for you and here's like a slice of an apple for you. It's going to be like, you can just eat as many as you want and you're going to be protected from whatever. So,
yeah, I don't know.
Main point, be aware this is happening, okay?
Yeah. That's the whole point of this series, right? Is to make people aware of things they might not have been aware of before so that they can make decisions. This is one of those things you definitely want to be aware of.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So where do you want to go next? Bill Gates?
I mean, of course. It's a great place to go.
Okay. So we're going to play a couple of videos here for you. Just we talked about Bill Gates being the biggest landowner. And so we're going to just give some insight into that via news sources.
Yeah. What I like about the video that we're going to show is that when we were talking about it in the episode, definitions was a really big deal when it came to that, right? So this is going to give us more statistics on like acreage, which I appreciate as well. Kind of adds to the picture.
Bill Gates has been snatching up 242,000 acres of farmland across the U.S., enough to make him the top private farmland owner in America. According to the Land Report, the tech billionaire has been purchasing agricultural land for years, building a massive portfolio of farmland in 18 states. His largest holdings are more than 69,000 acres in Louisiana, almost 48,000 acres in Arkansas, and about 20,500 acres in Nebraska. Additionally, he has a stake in 25,750 acres of traditional land in Phoenix, Arizona, which is being developed as a new suburb. It's not clear how Gates' farmland is being used or whether any of the land is being set aside for conservation. This is not Gates' only foray into agriculture. In 2008, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced $306 million in grants to promote high-yield, sustainable agriculture among farmers in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. The foundation also invested in the development of supercrops resistant to climate change and higher-yield dairy cows. While Gates may be the country's biggest farmland owner, he's not the largest individual landowner. According to the Land Report's list of the top 100 American landowners, Liberty Media chair John Malone is the largest landowner with 2.2 million acres of ranches and forests.
Okay, I'm going to play another one here.
We really owe it to the poor farmers to give them better tools. My awareness of climate change really came when I was visiting Africa and seeing that as the crops failed there more and more because of the temperature increase, that was leading to malnutrition. And of course, when malnutrition goes up, that increases deaths. It means that kids are not able to develop either physically or mentally. There's reasons to believe that by using the latest techniques of being able to sequence genes, using AI, using satellite data, that for all the crops, not just the main cereal crops, we can make them far more productive and far more climate resilient. They'll be able to improve the lives of over 500 million farmers. And so, this is a very fundamental, top of the list thing to address climate adaptation. Of course, we don't just want these improvements to be in the lab, we want them to scale up. We're impatient to see this done. Prioritizing the highest impact interventions like we do in health will be very important. But I think we'll look back on today as a real milestone towards accelerating this adaptation innovation.
So then that brings us to today. There was an article from May 10th that says startup raises $26.5 million for vaccine to stop cow farts and burps. And guess who's behind that? Bill Gates. Bill Gates, of course.
Shocking.
It says Archaea Bio, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, a Boston developer of a vaccine to reduce livestock methane emissions, raised a $26.5 million in venture capital funding led by investment fund founded by Bill Gates. So
yeah. First of all, one thing we learned in this series is that cows don't fart.
Yeah.
So this title is wrong. It's not a good start to this article.
Well, I don't know. It's really interesting that a couple things from those things. So he's in the first video that we showed, he's talking about increasing or making higher yielding dairy cows, like wanting dairy cows to be higher yielding. Okay, so we're like working on improving dairy and improving crop yields and all these things. Then we go to climate very quickly. Like he very quickly transitions into climate within a few years. And he talks about the poor farmers, which I don't know. I just found that icky. I mean, like,
I know.
Like
bad choice of words. And also the number of farmers that he said it would help 500 million farmers worldwide. So 500 million farmers, when you think of the world has a population of about 8 billion, right? 500 million farmers would be a 16th of the world's population. Is my math like accurate on that?
I don't know. I didn't do that math, but I mean, it seems
I think
accurate.
It is. So a 16th of the world's population are farmers that are going to benefit from what Bill Gates is doing. A 16th of the world. Yeah. I don't know.
But
like,
the
where do
other
you get
thing
these
is
numbers?
like,
I don't know.
Bill Gates is always like working on vaccines for everything. Like everything.
Yes.
Like I wish I had a syringe right here. Like
I wish I had that.
Here's a vaccine. Like it doesn't matter what it is.
I don't know. I just wish I had that focus. Like sometimes when I think about my days and the different things that I have to focus on during the day, and I'm like, but Bill Gates is just over there focusing on vaccines. Like good for him for staying. Good for him for staying so focused. That's impressive.
I don't know. It's interesting. So back to the farmland ownership, though, Natasha brought up a really good point that in this video kind of like solidified it. You know, farm ground and agriculture is a good investment opportunity. Farmland, like my husband always says, they're not making any more of it. You know, they're not making any more land. It's true. But with land prices going up, it's not as good of an investment as it once was for an investor. And we talked about that a little bit. And I just want to drive that point home. For an investor, it can be a good investment because they're buying this investment with cash. A farmer who has to potentially take out a loan because of the amount of that purchase, they're buying it at a lot higher rate per acre. So something that may be like, you know, say $15,000 or $20,000 an acre goes up to like $35,000 an acre very quickly, or even more than that based on the interest that you're paying. So that's just interesting to think about from an investment perspective. And then the fact that they also, like Natasha had brought up, maybe aren't investing as much because of the way things are in the economy. And there are better things potentially to invest in. So,
yeah. Well, money talks, right?
Yeah.
And that's,
because I think like the typical Instagram, you know, person worried, you know, person on Instagram worried about Bill Gates owning farm ground thinks that he wants to own farm ground because he wants to control the world. And I'm not saying he doesn't. Like, I am absolutely not. But Natasha did bring up potentially he just wants to make a crap load of money. And that's why he's buying farm ground. And she said it much more nicely than that. But there is that. And you can control the world with a lot of money. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, once the land belongs to him, he can put anything on the land that he wants. So whatever other industry he is in, you know, that's what he can put on the land. And so now he's profiting not only from having an investment in land, but also by using it to feed into the other industries that he's invested in, right?
Exactly. Yep. Okay, so some highlights from our episode. We talked about the Bill Gates thing. Jason Roundtree, that conversation was so interesting. I don't know.
It really was.
Really enjoyed that conversation. One, just reconnecting with him. I forgot how fun he is to talk to. I told you that afterwards. I told my husband that. I was
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was like, I just forgot how fun he is. And I remember like the girls I judge livestock with, we would kind of laugh, you know, talking about him, you know, just because he was fun to talk to. But I just forgot that. And it was just a great conversation.
Yeah. I mean, he was not what I was expecting, I will just say, because I was expecting a college professor, like kind of stuffy, like talk about not even judging a book by its cover. Cause I don't even know. I didn't know what he looked like. No, just, I guess judging a book by its title. Maybe. Anyway, he was not what I expected at all. He was loads of fun. And remember when we had Jill Rowe on a while back and you had said she is Texas bottled up in a woman. I feel like even though Jason is not in Texas anymore, I feel like he is Texas as a man.
Yep.
I mean, maybe not fully, but that's how he presents.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's good.
So it was really fun.
It's good. Well, he brought up SBTI, and that acronym means Science-Based Targets Initiative. And so in talking about that, let's read what that is a little bit. But he touched on it, but I just want to go a little bit deeper into that. So Science-Based Targets Initiative is a collaboration between CDP, which is Carbon Disclosure Project, and the United Nations Global Compact, and the World Resources Institute, and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So this global team is composed of people from these organizations, and they're basically joined together to set a science-based, which the term science we know is kind of hijacked, and that can mean whatever corporations or companies that benefit want us to, or want it to mean, I guess I should say. But they're setting these climate targets. And so essentially they're setting these climate targets. And I think what Jason Roundtree was kind of getting at is that these companies have been able to kind of say, we're working on our emissions, we're working to meet these ESG scores, but nobody really has any clear set in stone parameters for what that looks like. But this is a goal to set more clear parameters. And I was reading a little bit further into it, and basically what I'm gathering from this is it's going to be another thing, which we know ESG is going to be another thing that is not good for people, right? But this in particular is going to be another thing for farming that is going to harm the small farmer, the average middle farmer trying to work hard, and really benefit large corporations, because there's going to be this, quote, insetting. I researched this a little bit too on the WEF and a couple different places, but where instead of offsetting your carbon, like you're decreasing your carbon emissions through whatever means, you can keep doing the same thing potentially as a company or corporation, but then do something good on top of it. And I don't know if you want me to go into the airline model, but I thought it was a really good example. Is that okay? Does that explain it a little bit better?
So totally. It is interesting, and people will probably appreciate that.
Yeah. So I was watching, people send me chemtrail stuff all the time, and I'm not going to go into my thoughts on it because people get really upset at me because I can't just like look at the sky and say something. Like, I need evidence for stuff. So I was watching, though, this really interesting video where this guy was explaining that he has documentation from the FAA, I believe, that basically says that they are making trails in the sky on purpose. And it's not anything extra being sprayed in the sky. It's just that they are trying to meet these ESG scores by way of, and I might be explaining this not in a way that he would explain it, so I might be a little off there, but follow me. There's a point. So basically, these airplanes are flying just as they normally would, but they're flying at different altitudes that makes these lines in the sky that make it less sunny, essentially. And so they can say they're helping the environment because they're helping decrease the temperature of the earth. And so this would be an example of, I think, insetting is the term instead of offsetting. So they're not using any less fuel and they're not creating any less carbon, but they're doing something that the government sees as good so they can claim carbon neutrality.
It's so interesting to me because it's like, to make these flight paths, do they maybe have to fly a little bit further? Because I imagine that previous flight paths would have been like fastest from point A to point B.
I'm not even sure if they're changing. Well, they might be changing paths too, but I know altitude was different. So I'm not 100% sure how it works. But the point is, like, they can do something that's not really taking away.
Interesting.
And then still claim that they're yeah. So people with a lot of money, like companies with a lot of, money to work with, are going to be able to much easier meet these goals, these SBTIs that Jason was talking about.
Right. Because like, remembering our conversation with Will, for example, he was very honest in saying that when he switched to a regenerative farming model, that is a tough word, you guys, regenerative, say it a few times. But when he was very honest by saying when he switched to that model of farming, he was fortunate because he had certain advantages. He had no debt. I forget what the other advantages were, but he said if he didn't have the advantages that he had, it may have been too expensive for him to make the switch to regenerative farming. So when we see in like other industries, like people who have more money are able to do the things that not everyone can, just because it can be expensive to make the changes,
Yeah. Okay, what else? He talked about also Okay, so after we got done recording, he brought up, he's like, you need to look into FAIRR. And I was like, okay, I haven't heard of that. And he looked it up and said they had $70 trillion in assets under management. And so I looked this up, and pretty interesting because I had not heard of this, but it's some philanthropist, again, started this organization. And they have 70 trillion in assets under management. So essentially they are investing, they have $70 trillion of money from different people that they're investing and controlling for people. And they're basically a platform. I'm going to have to pull this up again and read to you guys what exactly they say they are. But I'll just explain really quick my understanding. They're basically a platform providing climate risk assessment and like ESG scores. They're basically looking at looking at companies' ESG scores, but specifically with animal livestock production. And so they're taking these assets. My understanding is they're taking these assets that they have under management, and they can direct their investments to a company or out of a company based on their ESG. So essentially, they're using financial leverage. Like they have all this money that they're investing. And by saying, we will not invest in companies that do this, or we will invest in companies that do this, they're trying to change patterns of animal livestock production. They're trying to change the way farmers farm by way of investing or not investing in companies. Does that make sense?
Yep. 100% it makes sense. I mean, so I don't know if you remember this, Rita, but probably like half a year ago, I was in my financial institution and I was just standing in line, and on the screens above, there was all this stuff popping up that was very ESG, like different things that you could do when you were buying, or different ways that you could keep track on your credit card bill of how much carbon is included in your purchases, or it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's literally everywhere. Not even if you're looking for it, but as soon as you're aware of it, you start to see it everywhere. And so, I don't know, when you think of this $70 trillion that is being essentially held over, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, if you think about like COP28 that meets every year, the summit about climate, the WEF meeting every year in Davos, that's basically about climate and I don't know, equity or whatever. So all of these world leaders and NGOs are meeting discussing climate, and you cannot tell me that this is all good and this is all moving a good direction. And that's what my fear is. And I shouldn't say fear like I'm sitting over here quivering. I mean fear as in concern, is that, and I brought this up in my conversation with Jason several times, it's just, I think that regenerative farming is lovely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But my concern is that we are participating in a way that we're coordinating with government agendas that don't want farming at all. Their goal is not to improve farming. Their goal is to get people to think their goal is improving farming so that farming is no more.
Yeah. Well, and I think so what you're saying, I think what's key for people to remember then is know your local farmer. Because for me, I want to shop from a regenerative farmer. You know what I mean? Like, I believe in that farming model. I think it's better for the planet. I think it's better for people. I think it's better for my family. So I want to shop that way. But I think what we need to be cautious of is that centralization and the monopolization, because that's what leads to the fragility. And also that's probably where the money that we don't want, where that investment money is being channeled to, is the centralization and the monopolization. So if you can actually find a farmer and shop local and know your farmer and encourage them in their agriculture practices that you really appreciate, that's the difference, right?
Yeah, for sure. And just like I said, in conversation previously, is motivation matters.
Motivation matters.
Motivation matters. If your motivation is decrease CO2, if your motivation is to move to a more, quote, sustainable, I'm telling you, sustainable, that is a word that can mean multiple things. If it's a sustainable food system, or decreasing, as this Jeremy Collier, the chair and founder of FAIRR, if it's to decrease 1.5 degrees by X number of years or whatever, the outcome will reflect that. If your motivation is to have a healthier cow and healthier food for the families in your community, the outcome will reflect that. So we need to keep our motivation in the right spot. Otherwise, we're going to move somewhere we don't want to be moving.
Well said. And just to keep our eyes focused on truth, right? Like, always search out the truth, because that won't steer you wrong.
Absolutely. And truth doesn't have an agenda, does it?
Amen, sister.
Another small business we love is Rowe Casa Organics. They offer products for your home and for your family. If you're into finding good quality, clean food, you're probably into finding good, clean, quality products to use for your cleaning products at home, and also for your skin, your hair, all of those kind of things. Rowe Casa Organics provides that. Every single product you find on their website, you'll turn it over, look at the ingredients, and you know what's in the product. You can pronounce it, you've heard of it, and it's very simple. And that's what CECILY and I both love, is we can clean our home, we can clean our bodies, we can put lotions on our kids, and we know what's in it, and it's good for us. So we appreciate that. I don't know, CECILY, if you have anything to chime in or a favorite product to share.
I always have a favorite product to share, and that would be today. I'm going to name 3, but 2 of them go together. Shampoo and conditioner bar. They're amazing. So I would try buying the duo for that. You will be so amazed. If you've used shampoo bars in the past and were like, these suck, they don't suds up, they don't clean my hair, then you need to try the Rowe Casa bar, because it's amazing. The conditioner is really great as well. And then the deodorant. The deodorant is incredible. We've tried many natural deodorants in our home and have never been very pleased. But Rowe Casa, I have gotten so many people hooked on Rowe Casa deodorant. So highly recommend that. Go to rowecasaorganics.com or click the link in our show notes and enter the code BOOMCLAP to save 20% off your order. I can't believe we're in episode 5 of this series already. Throughout this series, we've been zooming in on food supply, and it's clear that there are fragilities, and we want to help you ensure that you and your family are protected. This is why we've partnered with ARC Seed Kits. They make seed kits comprised of the seeds of nutrient and calorie-dense vegetables so that you get the most out of your family garden. All of their seeds are heirloom, which means that they produce year after year, and that you can save seeds and ensure that you and your family will be fed from your garden no matter what is happening in the world around you. I recommend that you check out their all-in-one kit. This is an incredible value for 50,000 seeds made up of 65 different varieties of fruits and veggies. They also take the guesswork out of it if any of you are new to gardening. They provide a guide to ensure that you will know how to grow and harvest every single variety included in your seed kit. If you're looking for a practical way to connect to your food supply, this is it. Even if you're thinking that planting season has passed, you still need to order these seeds because they have a 15-year shelf life. This is a small investment that will pay huge dividends that you won't regret. You might be tempted to look at supposedly similar seed packs on Amazon, but the quality is just not the same that you will get from a family business that tests their seeds and knows exactly what you're getting. So go to arcseedkits.com or click the link in our bio and use the code BOOMCLAP to save 10% off your order.
Let's go to this email from Jenny Harris. After we got done recording with Will, the next day I was like, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh man, I should have asked this and I should have asked that. But I had gotten a message from somebody recently asking me if a product, there was an animal product, and they were just like, does that come from cows that have been vaccinated? And I was like, I honestly don't know that. And I'm not sure if she was asking about a specific vaccine or all vaccines, but I said, I just operate under the assumption if I don't know specifically where something came from, I operate under the assumption that the animal was vaccinated, because I know even in like regenerative or grass-fed or more organically grown meat animals, vaccines are still a persistent thing. So I wanted to ask her that and a couple other questions. So I'm just going to read the questions that I asked and her answers. And I just, again, appreciate their openness to answer every question we have. So again, this is Jenny, Will's daughter from White Oak Pastures.
And just in case people don't remember, that was episode 1 where we talked to Will Harris.
Yep, that's right.
It's been a while.
That's right. Okay, so I asked her, do you give any vaccines to your animals, mainly cattle and swine? And then I said, I basically operate under the assumption that most places do, but I'm finding that others operate under the opposite assumption that if they see grass-fed or something, they just assume there's no medication or no vaccines. She said, we do treat our cattle for some respiratory illnesses. So there are some vaccines for respiratory illnesses, pink eye, black leg. We give way fewer vaccines today than we have in the past, and we will probably continue to back off until we have a problem. We do not and will not use mRNA vaccines, which we know there aren't any mRNA vaccines currently being given in the US. We talked about that on episode 2, I believe. And she said that they do not vaccinate their hogs. So I also asked her breeding technique, because I know AI, not artificial intelligence in the livestock community. AI has always been artificial insemination, but now AI has a different, widely used for a different reason, I should say, these days. But I asked her again, in cattle and hogs, do you use AI at all? She said, all of our breeding happens naturally. We don't AI any of our livestock. We have boars and bulls in our herd to get the job done. And then I asked her also, conventional ag is heavily subsidized. And I asked her if there's any subsidy or incentives to farm regeneratively. She said, unfortunately, no. We've applied for some grants that are available to smaller meat processing operations, but to date, none that apply to land management, which is really interesting if you think about all the subsidies, heavily subsidized wind and solar, which is supposed to be fixing, all of these problems. And that's something also that Jason Roundtree brought up. We don't subsidize like farming practices, but we're subsidizing all of this energy, but they go hand in hand, right? So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to discuss from the episode specifically?
Not particularly. I will say that one thing I think is really important, and that I kind of knew already, but it's just good to have it reinforced, was the issue of water. I mean, here we are today, we're recording, it's May 11, I think. So it's, spring still, but we've had a couple hot days where I am that makes it feel like summer, and it'll get back to spring temperatures like tomorrow. But I'm already hearing of like forest fires going on around here, or I should say north of here, and concerns with water. And forest fires up north really aren't related, but water in agriculture is so important. And so I really appreciated that conversation that we had. That was also with Will Harris, actually, in episode 1, where we talked about water. And I guess for me, that's one thing that I really appreciate about regenerative farming and cattle grazing when it's done properly, is that it's actually going to increase the ability for land to absorb water and then be reused. So just another thing to think about when you're, I guess, voting with your dollar, right? So
yeah. And speaking of voting, Mary Miller brought up, and I just want to reiterate, make sure you're staying in touch with your representatives and paying attention to how they're voting, paying attention to bills on the table. And then Bill Bullard, who we talked to about food labeling, he brought up multiple times, and I think more than one guest brought it up. Farmers are business people, and they want to do what the consumer wants. So as a consumer, vote with your dollars too, and make sure you're supporting local businesses. I mean, I think we're at a point where people are willing to pay a little bit more if they have the means for quality food from someone they know, rather than off the grocery shelf. And as Bill Bullard pointed out, we have no idea where that came from. And that ground beef could be from, hundreds, if not thousands of different cows. So that's pretty interesting. Cecily, there is something else you wanted to talk about. Oil. We cannot forget about that.
this whole conversation might make me just sound like an idiot or a crazy person. But so we had talked about, I think again, it was episode 1, about how oil is a non-renewable resource. And we got off and we're like, is it? Is it? Like,
well,
we think it is.
Will brought that up.
Like,
and I'm like, is it non-renewable? You're like, I don't know.
It was like one of those questions that we didn't really want to ask on the podcast, even because it would make us sound really dumb maybe, but here we are discussing it anyway. But I've just gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole with this oil thing, and I am just like this far down the rabbit hole, guys. And trust me, I am not even close to educated or an expert on this. But Rita, oil, as far as like the most popular opinions go, is made by organic material breaking down in the earth layers over a large chunk of time. Right? Okay. So first of all, how do we know that? Like, how do we know for sure that that's what it is? And what does that say about the age of the earth? And I'm going to just be honest and say, I'm not a person who has strong opinions about the age of the earth. It could be young. It could be old. Either way, I know that God created it. And that's really all that matters. You know, I don't get too hung up on that. But if we're saying that oil is created that way, then the earth has to be like millions of years old. Has to be. But not all scientists agree that that's what makes oil. And so if that is what makes oil, though, it is renewable. But as we discussed this morning, Rita and I, it would just be renewable at a very slow rate. Like, again, replacement rate would not match up with current usage. So I don't even know what I want to say about this. All I know is that this is very intriguing to me. And it's just another example of scientists know a lot of things, but they don't know everything. Like, there is not unanimous agreement on where oil comes from.
I'm just going to quote Dr. Fauci right now. The science is changing. Right. You know, how many times did we hear that just in the last 4 years? So that's the only time I'll quote Dr. Fauci. But anyway,
oh my gosh.
You know?
No. Oh my gosh. So science doesn't change. That's the thing. Okay.
What we know changes, but what we know changes. Yes.
Yes. And our understanding can shift. Science doesn't change. It is what it is. It is completely objective, and we're just the ones fumbling trying to figure it out.
Absolutely. But what you said earlier, I might sound dumb asking this question, or I might sound dumb, you know, talking about this. Who cares? Like, that's why we are dumb, because people are afraid to ask the question. And once somebody gives an answer to something, that's the answer. And everybody believes it. And sometimes that's okay because sometimes it's right. But other times it's not. And so it's okay to ask questions, even if it makes us sound dumb, because I think some of the smartest people ask questions, even of things that people think they already know, right?
Yes. Well, yeah. I don't know. I just
think that's the only way to learn.
Yes, it's the only way to learn. And that's what we tell kids, right? That's what we tell kids. But for some reason, we think we outgrow that. But I guarantee that after this conversation, there's going to be other people that are like, let's think about oil for a second here. You know, like, does that actually, I don't know, you know, what's actually going on there?
My question is, if oil is created that way, just with compression and time, with all of the modern technology we have, and I realize they are working on ways to create different versions of oil or synthetics that are like oil now, but with all the modern technology we have, why did we just turn to solar and wind? I have answers to that in my own mind, I think we did that. But why did we turn to just solar and wind and all of these things that are, quote, renewable, instead of just, like, why wasn't there more effort put into just developing something? Because I feel like we could do that pretty easily. Because these renewables are renewable in the sense as that, like, the sun does shine a lot, the wind does blow, but not renewable in the sense that those huge, like, wind turbines they put up will last forever. No, they have a lifespan of like 25 years. And the
as do
batteries
solar panels.
and the materials and minerals they have to get to make the batteries. They don't last forever, and that's not renewable. So there's a lot of nuance to this conversation. But
man,
anyway, it's just we're just planting seeds, right now. asking questions, giving no answers.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing this conversation on a podcast once. It was about dinosaurs, and it's like, how do they know what color the skin was? The skin is gone. How do they know? How do they know what sound it makes? Really? Like, how do they know? How do they know what it looks like? None of them are really complete fossils. Like, there's just so many things that we say we know without a doubt that it's like, we don't know. We are making the best guesses possible, but we don't actually know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yes. And the older I get, the more I'm just like, I don't know about any of it. I have so many questions about so many things. And then the questions lead to more questions.
Okay. And you guys came here for food. So this is Cecily and I in the last episode just going on tangents. But
getting on to oil and dinosaurs now.
Yeah. But it's all relevant. And I think to bring it back to food, we just talked to 9 different guests about 9 different things related to food supply. And I feel like we gave you a deep-ish dive, but still are just scratching the surface because this is such a complex issue, okay? There is so much that goes into our food supply. And it does go to oil. It does go to these conversations because all of it relates back to food, right?
Yeah. It even goes back to dinosaurs because apparently their organic matter helped create the oil.
Yeah.
So it's all relevant.
It's all relevant. Okay, one thing speaking of dinosaurs and all this, one thing I kept thinking of, and this is going to be the thing that makes me sound crazy to people, but I've been thinking of it so much lately, more than usual, is just how like there's nothing new on the earth. Okay. If you looked at the earth 100 years ago versus now, like everything I see in my house came from something already here. Yep. And so it's interesting to me when I think about whether or not things are harmful to us or whether or not there is going to be more of something or whether or not there's too much CO2 or any of this stuff. And like nothing, like nobody's coming and dropping like a care package over the earth and just like, here you go. Like, you know what I mean? Like everything was here and we're just doing different things with it all the time. Yeah. And so thinking about that changes the way, it doesn't really change, but it makes me think about the things that we're talking about related to food supply a little bit differently, or at least wonder about them differently.
Well, I mean, we have nothing outside of God's creation. Yeah. Like we might look at our laptop or our lights or our walls and just see drywall or steel or, technology, but we wouldn't have any of it outside of God's creation, which is why it is so important to steward it well. And food is a huge part of that, right? It has an impact on literally everything, but none of this was ours to begin with. It's just ours to use and to hopefully use wisely.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to do as we wrap up is a couple weeks ago in church, one of the passages that the pastor used as like part of his sermon was from Jeremiah 17. And it started, I'm going to start in verse 5. And I was sitting there listening to and enjoying the sermon, but also just thinking like, wow, that verse or those couple of verses just really, I don't know. I think it can be an encouragement to us as we wrap up this series and think about like, how do we move forward from here, So, and what kind of not just physical approach do we take to engaging with our food supply, but what kind of like spiritual and emotional approach do we take as we engage with our food supply and a changing world and how we interact with it? So Jeremiah 17, starting in verse 5, it says, "Thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. He is like a shrub in the desert and shall not see any good come. He shall dwell in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends out its roots by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. I just really love that. I feel like it just caps this series so well, down to the dry land and being planted beside, the water with our roots going deep. So I don't know. I just hope that can leave this series with you.
Yes. No, that's good. It's good. Applies well. All right, guys, we hope that you enjoyed this series. We hope you enjoy this format or not. Let us know. Let us know what your thoughts are.
I was going to say, email us and let us know your thoughts about the series, but also email us. And if you know anything about oil or dinosaurs or any of that, we would like to actually hear from you. I think it would be interesting, if someone else out there has thoughts on that. What do you think, Rita?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's end this now. So this was episode 5 in our 5-part series on food supply. And we really hope you gained a deeper understanding of where your food comes from and why it's important. It became super clear to us over the course of this series that the average farmer or even hopeful farmer is up against many barriers. And we definitely have ideals, like we discussed, of what agriculture could look like. But as we learned, even ideals have challenges and deep complexities. So we're so thankful to our guests for joining us on this episode, or I should say this series, and pulling the curtain back so that we could get a glimpse not only into their lives, but how they help ensure all people in our countries get the food that they need. And so we hope that you can take some of what you heard in this series and use it to make informed choices about your own food supply. As we heard from many of our guests, consumers are the ones that drive change. So hold your elected officials accountable, get to know your farmer, ask them questions, and most of all, know that they are working hard each day as they find a way to get food from their fields and barns to your table. And if you enjoyed this series, don't forget to please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss anything from this series or any of our upcoming deep dive series. We're already planning the next one, and we look forward to announcing it soon. So, as always, thank you so much for listening to the Boom Clap podcast, where culture and conviction collide.